This presentation of Care Foundation Incorporated attempts to explain at why the Philippine Mother Earth, considered one of the mega biodiversity in the world, is failing at sustaining the needs of the Filipino people due to corruption that result in man-made calamities of suffering and death. It is therefore imperative that we draw our strength from the wellspring of faith by taking the path of stewardship of life that reclaims back our God-given right over the Philippine life support patrimony. As life is a series of celebrated moments toward fullness and redemption, the prevailing socio-ecological condition where the implementing Department of Environment is lumped up into one with the supposed watchdog in protecting the integrity of the natural resources, thereby reducing the latter to mere commodity for one's bottomless pocket under the terminal extractive economy serving corporate greed alongside lure by partisan politics and destructive life after death souls only religion, opening the floodgate for sufferings and deaths.
When the watchdog and the one being watched are one, the DENR can be despicable. Care Foundation Executive Director with local priests and parishioners, clothed with authority under the National Illegal Logging Task Force, confiscated at least 8,500 cubic meters of illegal logs under the DENR logging operation by the DENR Regional Director, 2 Penros, 4 Senros, and 49 forester specialists in Surigao Sur and Agusan Sur between April and May 1999.
DENR officials likewise collaborated with a corporation in destroying virgin forests, ancestral homeland of the Kalibugan indigenous tribe in Siraway, Zamboanga del Norte from the late 1980s to the present, where poor members of the Kalibugan tribe who had opposed the logging operations in their 21,000 hectare ancestral land were brutally murdered by armed logging guards. The DENR officials even used interfaith bishops in the guise of forest restoration in the Nuded Mountains through memoranda of agreements for funding purposes, while at the same time destroying virgin forests through logging in General Nakar, where tens of thousands of logs helped killed at least 1,500 poor human lives in the 2004 Quezon tragedy. In 2006, the DENR boasted of its Green Philippines program by receiving billions of pesos funding for its tree planting along national highways from Luzon to Mindanao. With the funding lost in thin air without accountability and closure, with supposed planted trees gone into limbo, 8 years later, the DENR issued cutting permits for century-old trees along highways in provinces. Tens of thousands of illegal logs were washed down from the mountains during the Sendong tragedy in Iligan and Cagayan de Oro cities, killing thousands of innocent human lives. Parishioners and church people, led by Archbishop Tony Ledesma, recognized man-made malpractices like indiscriminate logging and irresponsible mining as factors that had caused the Sendong tragedy. The Save CDO President Ralph Ebragan filed a class suit against Secretary Ramon Paje and his men on illegal logging and mining with the Court of Appeals in the city in February 2013. Consequently, in May 2013, Secretary Paje was quick in receiving 138 million pesos reforestation funding for the denuded areas in Cagayan de Oro, where his RTD Obsioma confirmed allegations by upland dwellers that indeed the DENR allowed a logging operation in the said mountains via timber license agreements. CARE Foundation Executive Director was privileged to have headed a national team that was tasked to investigate the 1989 $700 million ADB OECF Loan 1 reforestation funding, which was heralded with at least 300% return on investment. The funds were grossly corrupted by DENR-led and influenced non-government organizations with contracts that did not include liability clause. Secretary Paje, being the longest time serving as USEC for field operations then and secretary now, is made aware of the billions of pesos reforestation funding, some of which are alleged to have been as follows. December 2009, launching of the 1.5 billion pesos funding for seedling production near CARE Foundation project site. After photo ops for media consumption, the funding got lost in thin air without accountability and closure, while seedlings were alleged to have been in limbo. Secretary Paje explains to President Aquino the mantra of huge returns on investment from reforestation funding, this time raised to 30 billion pesos. To justify for the 30 billion pesos reforestation funding, Secretary Paje and his men boasted of the Philippines as the new Guinness Book of Records holder by having planted 3.2 million trees in just an hour in Mindanao in September 26, 2014, despite Father Joel Tabora's great disappointment on the tree planting activity, where he demanded for a public apology from DENR since his 435 Ateneo de Davao University students that participated in the activity were not allowed to plant. The following are some of the billions of pesos reforestation funding in the most significant watershed in the entire country, the Marikina Watershed Protected Area. Had all these billions of pesos reforestation funding been religiously implemented, it would have been impossible for one to walk through the mountains in Marikina Watershed. On the contrary, the more billions of pesos for reforestation funding, the more the Marikina Watershed Protected Area have literally gone bald, desecrated, and stripped of vegetative cover.
In early 1990s, the Marikina Watershed Reservation used to have 8,582 hectares of natural old-growth forest cover. Unfortunately today, it is just completely deforested.
The following are some of Marikina Watershed's significant ecological functions, namely typhoon buffer, carbon sequester generating oxygen, freshwater supplier, soil erosion preventer, wildlife sanctuary and biodiversity propagator, and phytoplankton stimuli for the fishes of Laguna Lake and Manila Bay. Continuously being fed by a combined 500-kilometer long four-river ecosystems, the Wawa Dam, the only single source that supplied fresh water to Metro Manila for 60 years, from 1908 to 1968, with a water generation capacity of more than 1.5 million cubic liters a day until 1991, a resource that could spell either life or death, given an estimated 22 typhoons visit the country annually. Governor Wright issued EO 33 in 1904 that made Marikina watershed as its reservation not subject for settlement, entry, or sale. Then, in 1995, RA 8041 declared protection of watersheds nationwide due to impending water crisis. And in 1996, RA 7586 made Marikina watershed its protected area component. Unfortunately, facts on the ground are extremely disappointing. The DENR had disestablished the Marikina watershed from its status as protected area component of NIPAS in favor of commercial and industrial zone. Approximately 50,000 family informal settlers and counting, private subdivisions, executive homes, world-class golf course with superhighways mushroom, rampant selling of public lands involving DENR personnel, many old reforestation sites like the ADB OECF Lone One site had been sold and are being offered for sale. Recognizing the threat of water crisis, Congress promulgated RA 8041 mandating the DENR to suspend adverse development undertakings like logging and charcoal production, commercial and industrial subdivisions, concrete roads, dump sites, and it called on Malacanang for the protection and conservation of watersheds nationwide. But what is happening on the ground is just the opposite. Illegal intruders by the thousands continuously cut trees for lumber and charcoal. An estimated 500 sacks of charcoal a day are coming out of Marikina watershed protected area. Rampant timber poaching, illegal logging, arson, and tree plantation destructions in favor of commercial development under the watchful eyes of DENR. Tens of thousands of mature 30-year-old trees within Marikina watershed protected area, which were planted by dozens of families, were cut to give way for the construction of world-class executive homes and golf course. And since construction of executive homes on mountain tops involved massive ground movement, the rate of soil erosion had gone to at least 1,000 times the normal rate, endangering lowland communities. In 2004, the DENR facilitated the illegal declaration of at least 4,400 hectares forest land within Marikina Watershed Reservation as relocation site for the families that will be affected by the planned construction of Laiban Dam, thereby violating national laws. This prompted a people's march from Quezon Province led by the Bumaga tribe, opposing the planned construction of Laiban Dam with support from Metro Manila bishops. The water level in Wawa Dam rose to at least 10 meters during the Ondoy tragedy in September 2009, while illegal intruders continue to destroy whatever little remaining vegetative cover under the watchful eyes of DENR checkpoints in the area. With continued desecration of the Philippine life support systems, innocent human lives had to be aborted from the womb of Mother Earth. A painful price to be paid, indeed. In fact, the destruction of the forests, the devastation of wildlife habitat, and extinction of species, the poisoning of water bodies and the atmosphere was more than damage to the physical being. It was also a soul damage, a ruin within humankind, alienating us from the rest of life, self, family, society, humankind, and the non-human world. Because sacred creation is as interconnected, interdependent, and interrelated web of life. The culture of death is about complete. Quest for human progress is destroying the life support system. Lawmakers violating laws with impunity. Family-centered politics destroying the common good. The courts destroying justice. Religion destroying spirituality. Education destroying wisdom and creativity. Material possession redefining human values. Alongside Congress transforming itself into a piggery farm.
Pope Francis calls exploitation of nature a sin of our time, where he declares, "When I look at America, also my own homeland, South America, so many forests, all cut, that have become land that can no longer give life. This is our sin, exploiting the earth and not allowing her to give us what she has within her."
Pope Benedict XVI declared, "We need a decisive yes to care for creation and a strong commitment to reverse those trends that risk making the situation of decay irreversible." Education, formation, and mobilization, as Bishop Julio Labayan rescues our vital life support systems via the new mission of the Church for integrity of creation.
You know, the mission of the church is clear. Okay, it is to preach the gospel to all nations. That's why Jesus said, "Go, proclaim the gospel to all nations." And this is what evangelization is all about. But evangelization has got to be rethought because of, you would say, the culture of greed that has come into the picture. You know, people, you know, do not ever respect life nor the creation which God created as resources of life. You know.
Ocular inspection and community consultations for Care Foundation Forest Restoration Project site. 6. Main focus of watershed development, namely forest restoration, protection and conservation, habitat restoration and wildlife biodiversity propagation, production of organic fertilizer, organic food and herbs, expanded water capacity and utilization, research and documentation, environmental education, spirituality development and empowerment. Construction of reforestation structures and program presentation at PAMBI, Protected Area Management Board. Faith's Restorative Action Nursery. Ground preparation with stakeholders. Tree planting by thousands of priests, nuns, parishioners, students, teachers, professionals, corporate employees, with Father Arnel Recinto giving his concluding prayer.
Bye.
Sige, sige, dahan-dahan. Dahan-dahan lang. Ayan, dahan-dahan. Lupa. Dali lang. Okay, ibaba, dahan-dahan.
Dahil tayo ang nagre-represent sa lahat ng mga kaparokya natin sa Project 4 sa Our Lady of Miraculous Medal. So, it is by the grace of God that we are here. Nothing happens by chance. God has a reason and meaning why we are here. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Amen. God, our Father in heaven, the Creator of heaven and earth, the source of all blessing, the source of all being. You created us because you have a reason for us to exist here on earth, to be the caretaker of the things that you have created. We thank you for the strength. We thank you for the friendship. We thank you for our experience here. Because once again, we realize that life is not just we eat, we sleep, we go to work or to school, but life is beyond those things. Life is being a sharer of God's grace to others.
Students plunge into the clean, cool Tayabasan River after having planted trees on Mount Mainam's Care Foundation project site. These are Care Foundation's planted trees, growing faster than expected with the blessings from God. Unfortunately, CARE Foundation Incorporated was advised by DENR Regional Technical Director Arnolfo Hernandez to stop advocating saving the Marikina Watershed Reservation since there is no more wildlife in the watershed. The Marikina Watershed is already a commercial zone. RTD Hernandez and Director Marlo Mendoza rescued Mr. and Mrs. Delphine Go from their illegal claim of ownership over forest lands in Marikina Watershed Protected Area even without supporting documents in a meeting that was concluded at CARE Foundation's project site with DENR personnel resolving the area. The legal map of CARE Foundation's project site, issued and signed by the previous Regional Director Ed Principe and Regional Technical Director Manny Escazura, illegally replaced by Red Tamoria with a map where Mr. and Mrs. Delphine Go illegally owning 99 hectares of the forest land protected area. Affidavit stating that weeks later, a supposed buyer of Mr. Go's claimed forest land showed up in the area bringing with him the resorbed map. Affidavits attesting to the fact that Mr. Go and his men have been threatening CARE Foundation forest restorers, even poisoned them by putting malatayon on their drinking well. Camp Crame provided CARE Foundation its own security personnel. Mr. Go and his men continuously destroying CARE Foundation's planted trees with impunity under DENR watchful eyes. Illegal intruders into CARE Foundation's project site deliver their produced charcoal while Bishop Julio Labayan sent letters to DENR demanding for environmental justice. The destruction of Marikina Watershed Protected Area continues under the watchful eyes of DENR personnel earning bread and butter for their families. Anyone could just easily secure a charcoal permit from DENR at the right price any time of the day. The permit states that the charcoals were found to have been legal right from the source, which was instantly inspected by DENR personnel. Instant lie!
While the military regularly turns over the confiscated lumber and impounded vehicles to the DENR, the latter manufactures documents for the release of the said vehicles for the right price and consumes confiscated lumber through its mini sawmill just beside the DENR office.
Months after the commission of environmental crimes, after evidences had disappeared into thin air, like burning the tree plantation, DENR officials not only dismissed CARE Foundation's complaints for lack of evidence, but even accused CARE Foundation of doctoring of its evidence. Government officials under the Office of the President climbed CARE Foundation's project site and did the investigation that resulted in the dismissal of Red Tamoria for having destroyed the accomplishments of his predecessor, Ed Principe, in favor of Mr. Go. In July 2011, with Gaudencio Cardinal Rosales and Bishop Julio Labayen, Bishop Ernesto Ongchoco led the submission of a petition with a request for the President to proclaim the Marikina Watershed Reservation as protected area. Unfortunately, since the DNR officials that prepared the proclamation document were alleged to have been grossly involved in the commercialization of Marikina Watershed, the proclamation cleverly subjected the watershed's manner of protection to the operations of property rights, thereby hastening the watershed's desecration. Private commercial developments flourish with rampant selling of forest lands within Marikina Watershed Protected Area involving the DENR personnel. And the destruction of CARE Foundation's tree plantation by Mr. Go and his men even worsened.
The Nara planted trees of CARE Foundation have been transformed into lumber using chainsaws by the people of Mr. Go.
With DENR inspiration, a congressman filed House Bill 4426 with the lower house of Congress seeking for the reclassification of a DENR integrated social forestry program covering 1,430 hectares into alienable and disposable, despite the same have been found to have been legally wanting. The Mining Act of 1995, an act funded by transnational mining corporations themselves, is the root cause of mineral plunder in the Philippines. Minerals are another rich resources being stolen by transnational corporations from the Filipino people through large-scale mining, with devastating environmental, economic, and social consequences. The late Bishop Raphael Lim led the anti-mining movement in Marinduque that found its echo in the Catholic Bishops' Conference pastoral letters even to this very day. Continued desertification and commercialization of Marikina Watershed Protected Area in the face of imminent water crisis in Metro Manila and threats by global climate change is causing devastating environmental, economic, and social impacts.
The nation's predicament in a capsule. The Philippines is situated within the ring of fire with threats from intensifying global climate change, where the World Bank declared The Philippines leads the list of nations most in danger of facing frequent and more intense storms. This means more flooding, severe water crisis, heavy air pollution, heavy siltation and less phytoplankton in rivers, lakes, bay ecosystems, decreased wildlife and their habitat, severe poverty, hunger, violence, crimes, and social unrest. Urgent call to action. Proclamation of all critical watersheds in cities and municipalities as protected areas. Immediate investigation of the following to wit: 30 billion pesos reforestation funding from 2010 to the present. Marikina Watershed Protected Area desecration. Logging operation in the Kalibugan Tribe ancestral domain in Siraway, Zamboanga del Norte. Critical mining areas nationwide. And the creation of a People's Environment Monitor.
Restoring mountain ecosystems vital to all life forms on earth was clearly implied by the Lord Jesus, where he says, "For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home." Understandably, interfaith bishops had expressed their strong opposition to the confirmation of Mr. Ramon Paje as DENR Secretary.
Clearly, although the state is and always has been jealous in preserving and enhancing as much of our natural resources as it can, as shown in its huge reforestation protection funding and moratorium on logging, still the Filipino people had been stripped of their natural cover, shortchanged, devastated, and defiled by grave threats of global climate change. Could this be partly because the DENR people needed to summon their saintly character within in the face of too much tolerance and seeming unconcern on the part of the people? Faith could possibly stand as the only hope.
The environment is not only God's gift, but His bequest, not to us alone, but to all generations of life on the earth community, not just to feed us, but for us to feed her as well, not with our waste, but with our care, not with greed, but with welfare, not just for now, but forever. Thank you for your valued attention. Drinking from the wellspring of faith.